Here we go. Going
Okay,
live. We are going live. We are live.
we're here.
Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am back with J.M. DeMatteis. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well, thank you. Hope you're doing well too.
I'm doing pretty well, actually, and I'm very excited to be talking to you right now because uh, there is an echo. There it is. Okay. So I'm very excited to be talking to you today because we are talking about your new venture for Spellbound Comics. It's a new publishing company. Before we get to that, how did you get involved with Spellbound Comics?
Well, Spellbound Comics didn't exist when we got involved with it. I'll try to take a long story and shorten it. I do these writing classes, Imagination 101. I roll them out periodically. I don't do them regularly, but periodically for fun, I'll do them. I did one about a year and a half ago or so, maybe a little more. And one of the guys that took my class is a writer and a producer, a TV writer and producer named David Baldion. David and I became friends. We got to talking. I talked to him about the fact that I'm always developing new creator-owned projects, and I'd always wanted to do a Kickstarter, but quite frankly, the reason I never did a Kickstarter is just it seems like it's just too much work. The idea of trying to hold that world up by myself is like too much for me. And David said, "Hey, let me do it for you." So I thought, this is great. You want to do it? Absolutely. We'll become partners in this endeavor and you can do it for me. And we started discussing ideas. And like I said, I always have a bunch of ideas, and I have several of which were already in development with artists and scripts written and things like that. And long story short, I pitched him 4 ideas, and David's brilliant response was, let's do all 4.
All of them.
So what he came up with was the idea, and I think it's a great idea. We do 4 number ones, 4 pilot episodes, essentially. They're in 4 different genres, 4 different styles, 4 different amazing artists. You can't mix up anyone's styles in terms of the artwork on this stuff. We'll do them as individual issues. We'll do a nice collected edition with all kinds of extras. And through those discussions came the formation of Spellbound around all this. So there's a Spellbound website where you can actually, if you want to, buy things directly from Spellbound, or you can support the Kickstarter with all our amazing extras that we've got going on. And so it just kind of ballooned from there, and David has turned out to be not just a great guy, but a wonderful business partner and creative partner in this endeavor. He's just been fantastic, and I couldn't have done it without him.
I have heard that about Kickstarter, that a lot of the work is about the marketing and making sure it's out there and people know about it and posting on social media.
Yeah,
So it must be a relief to have a partner like that who will do that.
It absolutely is. And one of the great things about having 4 artists involved is that they've all got their own followings and they can hype individually as well. So we can roll out, because these things, they sink or swim on the support you get. It's, it's a roll of the dice and you don't know. So, and a lot of times a whole Kickstarter campaign could exist by your favorite creator. You may never know about it. So you really have to roll the word out. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here talking to you. But I'm happy to talk about this, but we can talk about other things as well as we roll along. Don't worry about that.
Oh, don't worry. I very much plan on asking you about the Lost Hunt later.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. So the Spellbound Comics will be launching the DeMultiverse starting next week. The Kickstarter
October 11th. At noon, precisely at noon. Yeah.
Eastern time. That's Eastern time.
Yeah, yes, I always forget to say that. And some people are sitting in other time zones. Okay, great. It's noon Mumbai time,
That will be so to the people watching in the Philippines, that is midnight our time. So
right. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
So please get up in the middle of the night and support us immediately.
Oh, we'll be awake.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. So the DeMultiverse, which obviously is named after the word multiverse in your name.
Yes.
Does that mean that these 4 books do not take place in the same universe? They take place in 4 different universes.
Yeah, they all, when people hear multiverse and they think of Marvel and DC, they think everything has to connect up and become one, like every story has to. These are 4 separate individual stories. The multiverse is in here in my head. You know what I mean? And that's where the DeMultiverse came from, and these 4 different stories, each one in its own universe, very, very different. Yeah. And, first we came up with the name almost as a joke, but we thought, that works. It is what it is. So that's what we're calling it.
But will they eventually meet up?
Oh, you know what? I'll tell you what. if all four of these are a huge success and go on for years, at some point I will figure out a way to have them cross over. How's that?
So let's talk about the 4 titles in the DeMultiverse.
Okay.
So let's start with the one you are doing with a person that you have most recently collaborated with. So that is Any Man with David Baldion. My
David
first question
Baldion,
about that is he or is he not the same person as David Baldi?
Yeah, I know it's really funny. And my wife always jokes because I know like 150 people named David to begin with, you know? And then I start to talk, well, there's David Baldion. Oh, David Baldi. I said, wait, what are you talking about? And actually the two Davids met on Twitter because of the similarities in their names and connected that way. So it's pretty funny. But no, they are not related in any way, shape, or form. David Baldion, as you said, I worked with on Ben Reilly's Spider-Man, and was unfamiliar with his work when we started the project, and was his biggest fan on planet Earth by the time we were done with the project, because he is just so good. As I keep saying, David can do, he can do the big slam bang, Jack Kirby, Sal Buscema action shots, and he can then turn around and do these really intimate, emotional shots. He can do humor. He's really, really versatile, just a wonderful artist and a wonderful collaborator. So, it was just, I was so delighted when he agreed to jump on board and do this project with me. So I'm sure you want to know what it's about, eh?
Yes, I would like to know what Any Man is about.
Okay, so I'm only going to tease these because I don't want to give away too many details. But the basic premise, this one is the closest to a traditional superhero story, in that it takes place over the course of about 50 years, from 1969 to about 2018, 2019. In 1969, this portal opens in the middle of Times Square, and through it comes this guy who claims that he is the survivor of an ancient civilization that fell millions and millions of years ago. Not Atlantis, but something on that order, an ancient perfect civilization. Their hubris became too much. Something happened, and the whole thing fell down around them. He's been sent to our crisis point in the 60s to help our civilization avoid what happened to his civilization. He goes on to become the great hero, the great iconic hero for the planet, not just for one city or one country, but for the planet. He's embraced internationally. The only problem is that everything that we know about this character is a complete lie. That whole origin story is made up. And part of the mystery of the story is unraveling, well, who is he really? Who created him? Why is he here? What is he doing? And it's a really, really fun story. And one of the things I like about it is, like I said, it takes place over the course of 50 years. So with all these stories, they're all pretty epic. So we've got a first issue and we want to hook you with that first issue. But I know in my head, oh my God, you have no idea where this is going from here. It's big. It's really big. And they're all like that. And Any Man is certainly like
that. If these series continue, if one of the series will continue, well, obviously one of the series will continue. Let
me explain that before you hold that question, because one of the great things that we came up with is that we want them all to continue, and in some way, shape, or form, they will eventually. But financially speaking, we'll only be able to continue one at a time right now. Maybe something else will happen, and we'll be able to continue them all. But right now, the goal is we'll continue one. So everyone who supports this by buying either all 4 first issues or the collected edition, which is going to have extras and artwork and essays by me and an introduction by Tom DeFalco and all kinds of great stuff. If you buy either the collected edition or the 4 issues, you get to vote on which of these 4 books becomes the first one to go to series. And then we will finish a 5-issue miniseries with that particular book.
Okay, so after that, will people get to vote on the second one as well?
Well, yeah. Well, I don't know if I can even think that far ahead, because the goal is then to do that, finish that up, and then we hope that, whichever one gets the next round of votes, or maybe we'll have voting again. We haven't worked that out. We'll move on to the next. Now, people might also vote and go, we want to see chapter 2 of all 4 of these. Let's kind of do another, anthology and see chapter 2. And if that's what people want, that's what we'll do.
How many? Can you describe where the name Any Man came from?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to give away too many things. Well, I'll just say that because he's an international hero, the idea is that he's a part of all of us. He lives in every man. He lives in any man. It's sort of that global reach of that name.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, we are joined by DeMatteis, and we are talking about Spellbound comics and the DeMultiverse. So we are talking about Any-Man with David Baldion. What's it like working with David for the second time now? Has your working relationship changed, evolved? Do you write less?
I have to write what I write, no matter who I'm working
Yeah.
with, and if I like to get granular and detailed, but David, here's the truth that I've said this before. Doesn't matter. I could write you hear about Alan Moore's scripts, which are 450 pages for an 8-page story. Doesn't matter. You give that 450-page script to 4 or 5 different artists, you're going to get a different story back, because everybody's interpretation, where they place the camera, how they draw the action, how, it's all going to change. So, and David on this book is as good as the Ben Reilly stuff was. This stuff is even better. It is so good. It's so good. I've been in this business for I don't know how many years, but I'm still essentially a fan. And one of the great joys of working in comics for me is when that email comes through and there's new art.
Yes.
And when I see that art, it's like when I was 10 years old, laying on my living room floor, reading a comic book and turning the pages, and it just makes my brain explode, and with all of these books, it's like every time I get a new page of art, and then the next layer with the coloring and the next layer with the lettering. I was saying to Taylor Esposito, who's lettering 3 of these books for us, until the lettering is there, it's not a comic book. You know what I mean? You need all those pieces to come together, and you have this magical thing called a comic book. And one of the fun things about working on this is having all this stuff coming in on 4 different projects at once. Here's coloring on this one. Here's, inking on this one. Here's the lettering on this one. Oh, spent the whole morning, discussing a cover with David Baldion, with our artist, Matthew Dow Smith, finalizing the little details of the Godsend cover. It's just fun. It's really fun.
David Baldion was your collaborator for Ben Reilly Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I will ask you, because one of the things that I really enjoy is the fact that you're always still, even at this point in your career, you are discovering and you're working with artists that you haven't really worked with before. And I think that's very commendable. And I think that's very cool of you. But I will ask you, because you worked with him on Ben Reilly Spider-Man, to compare him to the Spider-Man artist that you are best known for collaborating with, which is Sal Buscema.
There's a lot of Sal, I think, in David's work, because, Sal also has that great skill. Sal is an impeccable storyteller. I don't know, there's a better, there are maybe other guys in the business who are as good as Sal at telling a story, but there's nobody better. He also is a very emotional storyteller. Everything I ask for in my stories is there in the artwork. And he also, like David, can do the big action, and he can do the quiet scenes. Sal, basically, anything I asked for, he delivered 110% on everything. And David is very much of the same school. David can handle every aspect of comic book storytelling, and everything I asked for and more is there in the artwork.
David,
to compare anyone to Sal Buscema is one of the highest compliments I could possibly pay them,
To close that off, I will say that David, in one issue of Ben Reilly Spider-Man, did in fact draw the Sal Buscema punch.
Yes, and I specifically asked for that,
which was really cool.
Yeah,
that made me very happy.
Yeah, and isn't it great that there is a Sal Buscema punch that we know that? You know what I mean? It's just a great thing.
It's patented. Okay.
That's right. Sal gets 50 cents every time someone does that.
Okay, let's move on to Layla and the Lands of After, which you co-created with Sean McManus.
Yes, Sean McManus, one of my all-time favorite collaborators. I'm going to say amazing things about all these guys, and I mean it about all of them, or they wouldn't be working on these projects, because these projects are deeply personal to me. So the minute you bring someone else in to collaborate, you're kind of inviting them into your heart and soul and imagination. So it better be someone whose work you respect, and who you like personally as well. Sean and I go back years. One of my favorite things I ever did was a 2-year run on Dr. Fate at DC. That Sean drew. One of the best things I've ever done, and I still hold it in high regard. And working with Sean on that was just a dream come true. It's the same thing. I'm going to say the same thing over and over again. You hand Sean anything, and he delivers it and more. He's such a unique talent, especially when it comes to fantasy. And Layla and the Lands of After is an all-out fantasy. And he reminds me a bit of Mike Plug, who I collaborated with on a number of projects. That ability to get in there and create all these amazing fantasy worlds whole cloth. But when you have fantasy, you also have to ground it in real characters. And all of Sean's characters have heart and soul and reality. And I love working with him. And as a person, he's just a fantastic guy and a wonderful collaborator.
What do you think is
Well,
yeah.
go ahead. No,
What do you
go
think is the defining trait of Sean's artwork? If you could sum it up in one word.
I'd have to use 3 words: imagination, humor, and humanity. Because
Okay.
there's always a touch of humor that he brings to things, but he also grounds it in humanity. And if I say, give me a world with talking flowers and singing fish and trees that read your mind, he'll make that happen, and he'll add so much to it that I didn't even see in my own head,
I'll believe it. Yeah, I'll believe the depiction.
Yes.
So
exactly.
what is Layla in the Lands of After about?
So it starts in 1995. 13-year-old girl, Layla Tripp, is biking home from her friend's house one night. She's swept up in this ball of light and carried. Is it over the rainbow? Is it through the looking glass? She doesn't know, but she lands in this incredible magical world where I said, where the trees can read your mind and react, where the fish are singing and where animals talk, where, all this stuff. And it's kind of like, oh, I've landed in Oz, or is it Wonderland, or what is it? And well, what it really turns out to be is that this is the afterlife, and the lights that swept her up, that was the light of the car that ran her down, and she's dead. And she's now in the afterlife, where she encounters her dead cat and her dead grandfather and some other interesting characters. But Layla is like, I'm 13 years old. I don't want to be dead. You got to get me out of here. So it becomes this quest to figure out a way to bring her back. And there are a couple of twists in there that I don't want to get into, that we find toward the end of the first issue.
Of course.
So it's and because it's called Layla in the Lands of After, because my concept is that there are as many lands in the afterlife as there are human beings, as there are imaginations. We interact. It's a place that interacts with our imagination. So the lands are infinite, and everybody's in heaven is infinite, and it changes constantly. So and I see this as a 5-issue series, but the 5-issue series that I see, because I know what's going on, is the first of 3 5-issue series that's going to follow Layla through her entire life right into old age. But this first 5-issue series is when she's 13 and this journey that she takes through the Lands of After. But I have something very epic here in my head that I hope we get to do.
I hope you get to do it too. Did you seriously just combine things like The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, like the trope of somebody has to get home from this fantasy land with the afterlife?
Yeah, well, it's 2 obsessions of mine, which are The Wizard of Oz and I've read so many different books from different mystical and spiritual traditions about people's conceptions of the afterlife, so it's something that's always fascinated me, and I have my own ideas about it. And then I love The Wizard of Oz, and even as a kid, one of the things that always bothered me about that movie was at the end. It's not that way in the books. It's only in the movie where she wakes up in bed and, oh, Dorothy, you imagined the whole thing. And it's like, no, she didn't. I went there with her. It was real. So, combining these 2 ideas, I thought, well, at the beginning of the movie, she gets whacked on the head, right? With this window that flies off and hits her on the head. So I decided she's having a near-death experience. So Oz was her traveling to an astral plane, and that's what sort of putting those 2 ideas together was what started the germ of this story for me.
We have a comment in the chat from someone named Silver Knight Kyle, and I feel like putting those 3 together, I feel like he's a fan of Nighthawk. And he says that sounds incredible. He also wants to tell you that you are his favorite writer, bar none, and that his favorite single issue ever is Defenders number 92.
92. I think, is that my first issue, Kyle? Well, anyway, thank you, Kyle.
Anyway,
and if you can let us know if that's the first issue. I don't remember which one number 92 was, but thank you so much for those kind words.
I'm bad with numbers, so Kyle, you're gonna have to tell us if that is
Kyle
it.
will have to tell us.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a little surprised at the description of Layla and the Lands of After, because I know you're a very spiritual guy, and I know you've put a lot of thought into spiritualism and the afterlife and what lies beyond. But that is not the title that I would have assumed that you were placing those ideas in. That would
well, you know what?
Yeah.
This is an all ages book, basically. I want, this is the book that I want like a parent and their 10-year-old to both read and enjoy. And the great thing, is it Ursula Le Guin, or I forget which children's book writer it was, who said, when I have ideas that are really sophisticated, I'll write a book for young readers. because young kids fantasy and young adult fantasy is very, very sophisticated, and there's all kinds of room to play with these wonderful, wonderful ideas. And you want to be able to approach younger people with those ideas as well. I also don't want to put off people that are older, because some people think, oh, it's a kid's book. It's not like, oh, it's a kid's book. As you can tell by the concept, we're getting into some deep stuff here, but we're doing it in the way that L. Frank Baum did, or Lewis Carroll did, or any of these wonderful books. Madeleine L'Engle, that's who it was who made that statement, saying, if I have an idea that's really challenging, I'll write a book for young people.
I feel that. I feel that completely, because I was watching Batman the Brave and the Bold the other day, and I realized that show is more like, it has darker episodes than Batman the Animated Series.
And I wrote some of them. Yeah, I know.
Exactly. So,
and the great thing about that show is more than anything I've written for animation, that's the one where people say, I sit down with my kid and we both watch it and we both enjoy it. And that doesn't happen a lot, because a lot of times it's a kid thing and kids enjoy it and adults don't, or it's an adult thing. You're not going to let your kids watch it. So it's something that can cross the streams, as they say, and bring both of those audiences together is something unique.
Because it works on both levels.
Well, yeah, it works on both levels. And that's what Mike Plug and I tried to do with the Badazad and the Stardust Kid. I did a book for IDW, two series actually, called The Adventures of Augusta Wynn and Augusta Wynn, The Last Story. And I like working in that realm, and tend to be, when I write these kind of stories, the real fun is you're building an entire universe from the ground up. You know what I mean? It's like you have to, every little detail gets revealed along the way, and you're building universes, and it's really, really fun. And in a way, all four of these books are doing that, really.
Yes,
and
you're building four universes.
Yeah, and that's the chance, simultaneously. You know how many people I have hammering over there and sawing over there to build all these universes at the same time?
What is the one tip you can give to aspiring writers when it comes to world building?
I think it's surrender to your unconscious, because it's all in there. It was a lesson hard learned at the beginning of my career, to realize that all the good stuff is in your unconscious. The more you wrestle with it, the more you try to control, the more you get in the way. For me, anyway, I can only speak for myself, the more difficult the writing becomes, the clumsier the story becomes. When I take a breath and let go and put my head back, and suddenly this door opens in the back of your head, and out come movies and universes and worlds and stories. And the more you can surrender to that, the better the work is going to be.
I love it. So just let it flow organically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then anything that, let's say, that needs to be fixed or polished, you can just do that.
That's where the conscious mind comes in, because great, all this, it's like this flood comes out of your unconscious mind, and it's great. And all these ideas in there, but you still have to kind of, okay, take this out and prune this and straighten this out and make that sentence right and communicate it correctly. You know what I mean? So you need, it's almost like, here's a bad metaphor. You have the water flowing, and like that's the inspiration. Then along comes the plumber. He's got to get it flowing through the pipes. You know what I mean? So it comes out the sink, and you can turn on your tap and get a glass of water. That's the craft. So it's sort of like the unconscious inspiration, where all the magic comes from, and then you have the craft, and you have to wed those two things together. But without that inspiration, I can write a story just with craft, because I've been doing it long enough that I can, but I prefer not to. You want to have that magic of the inspiration.
Understood. Silver Knight Kyle would like to, in fact, clarify that it is your first issue. A Piece of Eternity is missing.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Kyle. Okay, let's move on to number 3, so this is the one where I would have assumed that you would put your spiritual ideas into, which is Godsend with Matthew Dow Smith. So what's it like working with Matthew? And what's it about?
Matt and I have been friends for a few years now, and I really, his work it's nothing like Steve Ditko stylistically. So I'm not saying that it looks like Steve, but you know how Ditko had a very specific style that you couldn't miss. Matt is very similar. You look at Matt's stuff, and it can only be Matthew Smith. And one of the things that he does so wonderfully, he has a great design sense, but he's one of those people that can do faces and body language. You look at the expressions on his faces, the detail on his faces. And this is a story I've been nursing for years. And during the pandemic, it's one of those, you take an idea, you write it up, you try to pitch it, and sell it, you put it away, you revise it, and it went on for years. And during the pandemic, I talked to Matt about this. He said, "Oh, I love this idea. Let's do it." So without any publisher in mind, we just started working on it. I started, I have a lot more script than what we have in the first issue already written. And Matt has just done a beautiful job with the book, and I'm very excited about it. And also, like the others, and I can't get into why, whatever you see in the first issue, however intriguing, it's like this narrow, and as the story goes along, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Same thing. I have the first 5 issues mapped out. I know where that ends, but that's the first of 2 or probably 3 5-issue miniseries. So the premise: our main character is named Eric Small. He's an insecure, lonely junior high school teacher. He's got like one friend. He got a crush on this other teacher at the school, but he never has the courage to speak to her. He had a really rotten, abused childhood, which is why he's in the state that he is in today. Into this world appears this being. I think of it like, Kirby gods, that kind of character that the media calls Godsend. But no one knows who or what Godsend is, where he came from, or truly what his agenda ultimately is. But Eric becomes obsessed with Godsend. There's something in this being that touches something really deep in him, something he never knew was there. And eventually one day, Eric wakes up in his apartment and there's a 7-foot turtle being with a man's head standing in the middle of his living room. And he's about to open up the door that will tear reality completely asunder for Eric and change everything he knows about himself and about the universe. And that's all. And it all ties into Godsend, and eventually an entire pantheon of gods that we only glimpse in the first issue.
Are they based on any particular pantheon of gods? Are you making it all up from whole cloth?
I'm making it up from whole cloth, but because of my reading and all these things, like the turtle figure, there's in a lot of different traditions, there's a turtle figure. In Hinduism, there's a turtle being that the world rests on the turtle's back. I forget.
Yeah.
I call my character Korm, and I think the Hindu one is not Korm, but it's a very similar name, and I just kind of played with it a little bit. So I'm pulling from everything and from my own imagination at the same time.
I like how you call them Kirby gods.
Right. Well, Kirby was the king of gods in comics. Whether you go back to Thor, to the New Gods, to the Eternals, to characters like him, who became Warlock. I mean, he was the guy. He was the guy. And my one-liner on this series is Jack Kirby meets Philip K. Dick meets the Matrix, because we're playing with everything we think we know about reality is not what reality is. Who you think you are is not who you think you are. What you think the world is not what you think, not what the world really turns out to be. And we just crack that a little bit in the first issue. And one of the things for me that I'm so excited, because I know where it's all going. So I'm already writing issue 2 or issue 3 or issue 4 in my head, and I have it mapped out. And so it's like, all right, let's get this done so we can do the next one and the next one,
I understand. I think a few years ago, I realized that you could read Kirby's God story in one go. Like, you can read his Thor, and instead of continuing with Buscema's Thor, you could read the New Gods.
Interesting. Yeah. New Gods is a direct sequel to Thor in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Right. And then instead of continuing with the other New Gods, you can read Captain Victory. So
right. Oh, that's true. That's true. And then somewhere in there, the Eternals slide in.
Somehow the Eternals will slide in, but I haven't figured that out.
I reread the Eternals recently, and I was blown away by how I hadn't read it probably since it came out. It's so good. Kirby, it's amazing. Like in like 3 issues, there's enough stuff going on and enough new characters introduced that they could have literally done an entire line of comic books based on the characters that he created in that series. It's amazing, just amazing. There's nobody like him, and there never will be anybody like him again.
Hugo and Chavez would like to say, loved your Moon Knight Scarlet Redemption arc.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I only wrote Moon Knight for like 7 or 8 issues, and 5 of it was Scarlet Redemption. So I'm always delighted when someone even knows that I wrote Moon Knight, let alone that they enjoyed the story. So thank you very much.
I was talking about Matthew Dow Smith and Steve Ditko for a bit, because I have this working theory that I've been throwing around sometimes, which is that, and this has nothing to do with an artist's skill, It's just that I feel some artists are replicable and some artists are not, right? So like
Right.
I feel like going back to the early 90s, I feel like we've seen a lot of Jim Lee clones.
Hmm.
Nobody is like Jim Lee, but you can get to an approximation of Jim Lee. But there is no Todd McFarlane clone. You know what I mean? Like
Interesting. Hmm.
it,
Well, you
it,
put it in terms of Kirby and Ditko. There are a
it
lot of Kirby imitators.
right. Yeah.
There are elements of Ditko that you see other people use, in his dimensions and things that he created visually. But no one really does Ditko in the way there have been some, artists, it feels like their entire careers have been built on doing Kirby,
Right.
and that's not a bad thing. If I was an artist, I'd be doing the same thing, because
Uh,
who else are you going to learn from and imitate and aspire to be like? But yeah, some people are just so particular and so unique. It's, in a weird way, it's sort of like, I'm the biggest Beatles fan in the world, but there's lots of bands that have done Beatlesque things. They take from
mhm.
the Beatles and they make sounds inspired by the Beatles. And someone like Bob Dylan is so sort of individual and Ditko-esque, that when people do Dylan songs, they tend to change the arrangements and do it their own way, because you can't really do it Dylan's way.
Yeah.
Even with Lennon and McCartney, it's I think it's easier to interpret a McCartney song than a Lennon song, because Lennon is more just in his voice and his tone and his attitude. It's not a quality thing, they're both brilliant, but it's harder to, like, sometimes if you remove the Lennon from the song, it's not the same song. Where you can remove McCartney from a McCartney song and have someone else do it, and you'll still have a. Do you know what I'm saying?
I
It's
know.
there's
Yeah.
something singular there.
Right. It's like if I feel like an artist could study Kirby and somehow create maybe a 75% match of Kirby, but however somebody wants to ape Ditko, whatever lines Ditko decides he's going to draw that day, only Ditko ever knew.
Hmm.
And I feel like Matthew Dow Smith is a lot like that. I think he's inimitable.
Yeah, it's something really, really specific. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Some people go a whole career and they can't find a unique voice or unique style, and some people are just born with a unique voice and style.
Is it a different experience when you're writing for somebody with such a unique style versus if you're writing for somebody like I feel like with somebody like Sean McManus, you pretty much know what you're expecting to see.
Right. Well, here's what it is. When I'm following the story, I'm just following the story, and I'm writing what I'm seeing in my head. And God bless you, artists. This is what you have to draw. But the more you work with somebody, like, you mentioned Sean. Sean is an example. I know Sean's stuff inside and out. So as I'm writing, what I'm visualizing in my head is Sean. You know, and that's what happens as you work with someone regularly. Now I know, David's stuff and I know Matt's stuff better. So if I'm writing for Matt, I'm seeing Matt's stuff in my head as I'm creating the visuals. It doesn't mean I'm going to necessarily specifically tailor things, say, well, so and so is better at drawing this than that. No, the story is the story, and the story is king. So the story has to be what the story has to be. But what I'm seeing in my head is that artist's work.
Did you pick the artists for these particular pilots when you conceived the pilots, or
Well,
what?
certainly when we were putting this together, yeah, some of these
Yeah.
projects have been around for years, so you approach one artist with it, and then nothing happens, and years go by, and you find somebody else. Sean and I, though, have been talking about Layla for 12 years, probably. And we pitched it. We had one place where we were literally about to sign contracts, and something was wrong with the contracts, and we had to walk away. And this is just what it's like out here in the freelance land. People don't realize sometimes how long it takes to get an original project out in the world. Whereas we were talking about wisdom, I was talking to David Baldion. We were bouncing artists around, and I've been a big fan of Tom Mandrake's for years. Since I
Yeah.
first saw him on the Spectre years ago, because he does supernatural stuff like nobody else. It's just so good. The mood, the line work, the tone of it, But Wisdom is a supernatural Western, and Tom is also does Westerns and does them brilliantly. So it's sort of like once we hit on that, it's like, well, who else could do this? No one. He's got to be the guy to do this.
Yeah.
So I was so excited when he decided to sign on and agreed to do it with us.
Tom Mandrake is on my list of 3 modern artists that I would pick to draw a Western.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but on that list, he's the best one at drawing the supernatural. So that would be John Cassaday and Tim Truman.
It's a great
but,
list.
But I think he is the best one of those three at doing the supernatural stuff.
Yeah. So I guess we can talk about wisdom.
Yeah, let's segue over to wisdom now. So what's it about?
So it's interesting because when I was a kid, in my generation, Westerns were a huge thing. When I was like 7 years old, half the shows on television were Westerns. I have pictures of myself at like 4 or 5 years old in a cowboy outfit with my, plastic 6-shooters and my cowboy hat, riding my hobby horse. I loved Westerns as a kid because everybody did. And then, years went by and, Westerns went away. And so did my interest in them, with the rare occasion, like, Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven or Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But in general, if I'm like flipping channels and I see a Western come on, I go to the next station. And the only thing as an adult that I tumbled to that was a Western that I kind of got interested in is I'm a huge fan of old radio, from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And there was a radio series, which later became a TV series, called Gunsmoke, that I stumbled upon on the radio one day. And it was like, this is so well done, a real gritty adult Western. But still, that is not a genre I ever saw myself writing. And we talk about the unconscious. This is literally how it happened. I was laying in bed one morning and I see in my head, there's a movie starting. Oh, let's get into our seats. There's a movie starting. Oh, it's a Western. Oh, that's interesting. Who is that? Let's follow him. Oh, it's a supernatural Western. And then what happens is you run out of bed and I run into my office and I start to type and I get down as many of those ideas as I possibly can. And then you begin to develop it and follow those characters and see where they go. And that's where wisdom came from. It literally started with this movie in my head that I had no idea about until it started playing in the theater of my brain, So it's about a man named Gabriel Wisdom. He's, in the 1800s, born and bred in upstate New York, a very rich family, very indulged, pampered guy who had dreams of becoming an actor. Problem was he wasn't a very good actor, but his father had enough money that he indulged him. He got his own theater company, goes on tour, and he's going to fail. Then his father dies. He loses all the money, but he's met the woman of his dreams, and they head to Chicago to chase their dreams, and that all collapses. And then they head out west, and he starts a newspaper out west. And that collapses. And then there is a tragedy. And we don't know what it is, but there's something supernatural involved where it looks like his wife and his child have been killed in this fire started by these mysterious entities, and we don't know who or what they are. And this begins the turn. In the course of the story, we follow Wisdom from his beginnings to his theater life, to his he has a traveling roadshow where he goes and he performs, but it becomes a front for the supernatural work that he's doing, because what this story evolves into, my one-liner is Deadwood meets the Lord of the Rings. It becomes a massive conflict between light and shadow set against the Old West. I don't know if you're familiar, or also John Ford's The Searchers is a classic Western movie, because he discovers ultimately that his wife and child are alive and they're in the hands of these forces. So he has this big cosmic quest to stop the shadow, this negative force that's coming for the world, and also to find and redeem his wife and daughter who have been corrupted by this force. And then he has the people that he's traveling with. And so the story, I said that, Any Man takes place over 50 years. This takes place over a span of years also, as we're jumping back and forth in his life and in the lives of our supporting players that travel with him in this traveling theater show.
Would you say this is the title where you tackle most the theme of duality, which, you love tackling?
Well, it's certainly in there, and Wisdom himself. I mean, because at one point he becomes the most savage gunslinger. You know what I mean? He becomes a cold-hearted. He goes from this innocent soul to a cold-hearted murderer to a sorcerer, and so he's got so much. He's so many opposing forces in his soul that he has to wrestle with in order to achieve both of his goals. He has the personal goal to redeem his family, and the bigger goal to stop the evil.
Hey everyone, if you're just joining us, we're talking to JM DeMatteis. I'm still struggling with your last name.
Nah, you're doing okay. Don't worry about it.
One day I'm going to find out I'm pronouncing DeMultiverse wrong.
It's DeMultiverse.
And if anyone has any questions, then please leave them in the chat. We will get to them at some point as we are talking. So out of all of these 4 titles, I was going to ask you if you have a preference on which
I
one
can't.
continues,
It's like
but
saying,
you're not going to
so
say it.
here are your kids. Which one do you love the most? You know what I mean? I tell you, the one I love the most of these stories is the one that I'm involved with at the moment.
At
Do
the
you know what I
moment.
mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like I said, it's these 4 universes in my head with these infinite trails kind of going out. And if I jump on the Godsend trail, then I'm totally into that. And I'm obsessed with that. If I jump on the Wisdom trail, the Layla trail, the Anyman trail. So it's whichever one I'm involved with at the moment.
Okay. Let's talk about the Kickstarter. Right? So the
Okay.
Kickstarter is starting on October 11th.
October 11th at noon Eastern time. And we're also going to have 4 alternate covers by 4 really amazing artists, 3 of whom I can't really tell you who they are. One of whom has been announced. That's J.H. Williams III, who is extraordinary, who, if you know, from Promethea and Batwoman and all the other amazing work he's done.
And a regular guest on my show.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
He did an alternate cover for Layla that, it took me like a while to pick my jaw up off the floor from this amazing cover that he did. And the 3 other guys that we have working on this are just as good and just as well known. Actually, let me think. 4 other guys, because we have somebody doing a cover for the collected edition as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard that already, right? J.H. Williams III is doing a variant cover for Layla in the Lands of After, so that is pretty cool.
So yeah, and there'll be we haven't announced it. There'll be a host of rewards depending on the level at which you contribute to the Kickstarter. And I know that there are people out there that don't like Kickstarter, and they are welcome to go to the Spellbound Comics website, spellboundcomics.com, and they can purchase any of these books individually or collectively or however they want. But again, the fun of it is you buy all 4, you buy the collection, you get to vote on what's coming next. You get to determine the course of my career.
The Kickstarter does give you direct interaction with your readers and with the fans, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, with this whole thing is that, one of the things that Kickstarter does is it takes away one more wall between you and your readers. You're not going through a publisher who's doing this or not doing this or that, it's all in your hands. I've done a bunch of creator-owned stuff over the years, and the reality is sometimes you work with a publisher, you put all your hopes and dreams into this project, and a lot of times, honestly, on creator-owned stuff, people are working for free up front, and you're getting your money on the back end. And then the book comes out, and it's like they just shovel it on a truck with 100 other books that they're publishing that month, and and then they send the truck out into the lake, and it sinks, and you never see it again. So. With something like this, it's in our hands. If we sink, if we swim, if we're a massive success, whatever it is, the joy is in the fact that we're in control of it. All of the creators and David, who was from Spellbound, who was a full partner in this and is working his ass off on this, I have to say. So it's very exciting. It's really exciting.
We have a comment from Peerless Loser. I'm not sure when this came in, because I'm just now checking it. His question is, by force you mean Native Americans, right? I don't know what that's
force.
by force. Yeah, I don't know what that's referring to.
I didn't say anything. I don't think I said. Maybe he misunderstood something I said.
Maybe. Silver Knight Kyle would like to ask.
Well, if that person could clarify their question, and I'll be happy to answer it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he misunderstood something I said.
Yeah. So if Peerless Loser, if you would like to retype your question so that we have more context. Silver Knight Kyle would like to ask you who your favorite writer is. And he's going to say Vonnegut is pretty high up there.
Vonnegut is high up there. If I'm picking my favorite writers, Charles Dickens, Ray Bradbury, Vonnegut, J.D. Salinger, so many more. But Dostoevsky, those 5 are really, really up there for me. Really up there for me.
Who's your favorite comic book writer?
God.
Now I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, it's like there's some, well, Jack Kirby, because I consider Kirby a writer. He's not just an artist; he is a writer. Stan Lee, of the guys from this, I think about the guys that I was reading as a reader. I can't get into judging my contemporaries, you know what I mean? And I've been doing it for 40 years, so I have a lot of contemporaries. So leave out the past 40 years, Lee Kirby, Steve Gerber was a huge, huge influence on me. Len Wein was a huge influence on me. He was one of the first editors I worked with, and both as a writer and as an editor, and so many more that, you know, once when you begin to list this, what happens is there's 20 people that you, after the fact, go, I didn't mention, you know. So I'd rather not go on, but certainly Kirby and Lee and Gerber and Wein and many more.
Peerless Loser would like to point out that he was just talking about The Searchers and he was just being snarky. It was a John Wayne movie. He did not intend to have that question aired. I am sorry, sir.
Okay. It was just a comment on The Searchers. Okay.
I'm sorry, sir. I did not mean to offend you, or, well, not offend you. I didn't mean to say it if you didn't mean to have that one aired. I'm sorry. Okay. The Kickstarter, you get to choose the one that you want to continue, but you do have an option of having them all continue.
Yeah, absolutely. If that's what people want, that's what we'll do. It's really, we're really going to do this. I mean, if enough people say we want all 4, then the next Kickstarter, which we hope will be probably next fall, you'll get issue 2 of all 4 books and a collected edition with all 4 books.
Okay, if you pick all 4, then the next Kickstarter will be out next fall. What if they only pick 1?
Then probably the same thing, because it takes a, you know, in either case, there's the 4 books that have to be done. You know what I mean? To continue this thing. So probably it would probably, you know, don't hold me to any of this because we're still in the middle of it. But I'm thinking probably next fall would be the next Kickstarter. And the good thing about this also, I have to say, because you hear stories about people that contribute to Kickstarters, and, you know, 72 years go by and they're in a nursing home still waiting for the book to be delivered, you know. And the great thing about, and I'm slightly exaggerating, I think, but the good thing about what we're doing is these books are all almost complete. I mean, you know, 2 of them are already, you know, penciled, ink, lettered, colored, done. The other 2 are close to it. We have to put together the collected edition and, you know, get the extras together. And I'm going to write an essay for each of the series. And I said Tom DeFalco is going to write an introduction. We'll have but basically the stuff is 90% done already, which is really great. So you're not going to be waiting forever for these books to come to you.
Pretty cool. And Tom DeFalco is doing the introduction, which is a really nice thing because his last name also starts with the same letters as yours.
DeFalco in DeMultiverse, right?
And of course, the 2 of you are old friends.
We are. Yeah.
What's the perspective that he brings to the DeMultiverse?
Well, you know what, David Baldy, not David Baldion. David Baldy asked me, because we were talking about who could we get to write a forward for this collected edition. He said, well, if you were getting inducted into like a comic book Hall of Fame, who would you want to get up there and induct you? And I thought, well, you know, Tom DeFalco would be a good choice. You know, Tom and I know each other forever. We both, aside from the fact that we're friends, and it's a great thing about this business. You know, especially when you've been in it this long, you really get to know people, and a lot of the people that you work with become real friends, not just work friends. So Tom is a dear friend too. But we also both really respect each other professionally. I understand and respect his work and vice versa. So I think he could bring just a great, and he's worked with me since 1980. So he's got a perspective on the whole panorama of my career. So I have no idea what he's going to say. It might be, you know, it might be one paragraph and it might just say hoo-ha, which Tom likes to say. You know, I don't know, but whatever he says is okay with me because Tom is an amazing human being.
How close is Tom DeFalco the person to Tom DeFalco the Bullpen Bulletin character?
I think in Tom's head, they're the same guy. I think in some ways he likes to project that. You know what I mean? I'm just this guy here. You know what I mean? He is like so smart and so creative. He knows this business inside and out from the creative end, and he knows it inside and out from the business end. I don't know, even after being in this business for years, I don't know a tenth of the business the way that Tom does, because he was sitting as an editor and editor-in-chief for years. You know what I mean? And up to his shoulders in the business, and he's just so smart and so insightful on so many levels. And like I said, this is becoming the Tom DeFalco salute hour. But it's true, he's just a great guy, and I'm really happy that he agreed to do this for us.
When is the release date for the book? So, like, if people pledge starting October 11 onwards,
I think, and David Baldy would have a better idea because he's handling that end of things. I think they're hoping to get these, because a lot of it depends on the printing. You know, a lot of these things get printed overseas and there's delays. So I think that the goal would be the spring, the books would all be mailed out.
Oh, nice.
But don't quote me. But if you go to the Spellbound Comics website, you can sign up, you can get alerts, and they're all the latest news will be there. There's also a Spellbound Comics Facebook group. And I'm tweeting, David's tweeting, the artists are tweeting. We're all getting the word out. But the Spellbound Comics website has tons of information, spellboundcomics.com.
David Baldy is going full force in that Spellbound Comics Facebook group. Basically talking up all of the creators.
Yeah, it's great. He's really, like I said, he's working really, really hard, really, really hard. And, David has, 20 years of experience in TV as a producer and a writer. He's also a businessman who runs his own business. So he's got kind of what I'm talking about Tom. He's got a creative skill set and he's got a business skill set. And I have to be honest, I don't have that business skill set. So it's great to be working with somebody who does. If I ever make a wise business decision, the gods applaud because I didn't think you could do that,
That's because you write so much.
Yeah, it's true. I spend too much time in here.
And it's not just that you write so much. I think this whole thing, the DeMultiverse has really, really showing what you've demonstrated throughout your whole career, which is your ability to write anything. And I feel like there's not really a lot of, there's a lot of great writers, but I feel like the writers who have the ability to write any genre, any tone, or any age bracket, I think those are rare, and you are one of them.
Well, thank you. There's two levels to that. One is it keeps me interested if I shift. Also not just to work in comics, but to work in animation and live action TV. I just had I'll plug it. I had a new novella that came out in June called The Excavator, which you go to Amazon.com. You can purchase either as an ebook or a physical book. Very, very proud of it. It's a supernatural thriller. But, you got to keep jumping around because I've been doing this a long time and you want to keep yourself interested. If all I'd done for all these years was write superhero comics, I probably would have stopped a long time ago. I love superhero comics, but too much of any one thing, I think my brain would have imploded. So I've been lucky enough to work in all these different genres and styles and mediums, and so it keeps me going, and I think it keeps the readers interested too.
And even to that point, even if you want to talk about superhero comics, you are known for writing the funniest book with Batman in it, which is Justice League International.
It's true. And the darkest Spider-Man story ever written.
And the darkest Spider-Man story ever written.
And I wrote them at the same time.
You wrote them at the same time.
I look back at that and wow, that's I didn't realize it at the time because you're just working, I look back now and okay, on Monday and Tuesday, I'm writing, JLI with Keith. And on, Wednesday and Thursday, I'm in the sewers with Vermin and Craven's Last Hunt, it's interesting.
And speaking of Craven's Last Hunt,
okay.
In November you are releasing The Lost Hunt, which is a sequel to Craven's Last Hunt, set during the time when Peter Parker was powerless in 1995. Yeah. He's in Portland.
It sort of runs parallel to the Ben Reilly series because the Ben Reilly series was just the moment when Peter's left New York with Mary Jane. They go off to have their baby and live happily ever after. Oh, poor Peter. But they thought they were doing that. And Ben steps into Spider-Man's shoes. So we followed Ben. Now we're going over to Portland to see what's going on with Peter and Mary Jane. So the only thing we ever really saw was a miniseries done years ago called The Final Adventure. Yes. At the end of that series, Peter lost his powers. So now we have a powerless Peter Parker, a very pregnant Mary Jane, and we have a shadow of the past, a shadow of Craven's past, two shadows of Craven's past, actually, coming for Peter. So when you're dealing with a powerless Peter Parker, you get to explore the question is, what makes this man a hero? Is it the fact that he...
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just finish this thought. Is it the fact that he shoots webs and climbs walls? Or is it something in here, regardless of the costume or the powers, that makes a hero? And I've always said that, mask on or mask off, the stories are about Peter Parker, not Spider-Man. And we really explore that in this series.
Are the shadows of Craven's past? Because Craven is still dead.
Craven is still dead, but one of the new characters that I introduced is a character I've had in my head for a couple of years now, is a window into Craven's past. Because I wanted to know what happened to make this exiled Russian aristocrat who had lost everything in Russia and come to the New World, and his mother committed suicide, and his father was a broken man. How did that man become Craven the Hunter? And there had to be someone in that middle piece. And so this is about his relationship with that someone who is a major, major new character who's involved in this story, as is, if you remember, there was a character called Gregor, who was sort of Craven's right-hand man.
Yeah.
So Gregor is the one who's on this hunt for Peter. And then our other character is in there throwing a little bit of chaos into the middle of it. And she, it's a woman, is the doorway into Craven's past. So you get to learn a lot about Craven's past, a lot about this new character, and then, powerless Peter, Gregor, pregnant Mary Jane. There's a lot of stuff going on in this story. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's interesting because sometimes you don't really choose the story you get to do when you're working on the mainstream character. So they came to me after Ben Reilly and said, well, we want to do another story, but we'd like to do something that somehow involves Craven. And my first thought was, oh, Craven again. You know what I mean? But then what happens is some little switch gets flipped in your brain. And then I remember this character I was thinking about, and all of a sudden this story explodes, and I'm as excited about it as if I had gone to them and said, please let me do this story in the first place, So we're having a great time with this one, and it's out in November.
To be clear, the woman is an original character, not
an original character. You have never seen her before. Yeah.
So it's not Calypso.
No, it is not Calypso.
Okay. So will it be
very different character than Calypso?
Will it be referencing the Ben Reilly series?
In minor ways, because it's going on at the same time. You know what I mean? There's a point where Mary Jane says to Peter, maybe you should give Dr. Kafka a call, because and she's at that same point is dealing with Ben over in New York, little things like that. But it's not like there's no major crossing over going on. This story is very much its own thing. And hopefully, whether you've read Craven's Last Hunt or not, we will present the story in such a way that it will stand on its own and be an interesting story.
Will we just eventually? Yeah, will we just eventually get to the point where you are writing mid-90s Spider-Man stories currently?
I don't know. I said to my editor recently, I said, by the way, I can also write stories that take place in the present day. But whatever. I have a feeling when this one wraps up, we'll find something else to work on. Whether it's a 90s era Spider-Man story or something completely different, we'll see. What
do you think of what they've done with Ben Reilly in the current continuity?
I haven't read it, so I couldn't comment on it. I know it's stirred up controversy, but you know what? Everything stirs up controversy. So what are you going to do?
It's so weird to me because I'm one of those guys. Like I don't really get mad when changes happen to characters, because I think that's part of the whole thing. And yet the one exception to that is Ben Reilly. Like, I feel very, very protective of that character, and I'm not really sure why. So.
Yeah, I understand that. I have a profound connection to Ben, and I really love that character.
Yeah,
but I know they have great people working on those books now, so I'm sure that they've got some interesting and challenging stories going on. And you know how comics go.
Of course,
it always changes. It always changes.
At one end, it resets.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever the status quo is today, it doesn't mean it's what the status quo is going to be in 6 months. And that's not me with any insider knowledge. That's just me, reading comic books for all these years.
This is me looking it up now. I don't know how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, also, while we're hyping, the Web of Spider-Verse #5 came out this week, and I got a story in there that I co-wrote with Dan Slott, which is also a Craven story, but it's Craven of another universe. It's Craven the Spider Hunter. It's a fun little story, and it's drawn by Bob McLeod, who was the inker of Craven's Last Hunt, and that's out this week, and it's a sweet little story. Well, sweet might be the wrong word, but it's a fun little story.
Okay, you're working on this with Aider Messias.
That's right.
So
that's right. Yeah. Another artist whose work I didn't know before we started, and he's really, really excellent. This, like Craven, is a very dark story. It's very moody. It's essentially a horror story. Craven's Last Hunt was a superhero horror comic, and The Lost Hunt has a lot of those elements in it. So you really need someone who can deliver on the mood and the mystery and the nightmarish qualities of it, and he's doing an excellent job.
How do you think he compares to Mike Zeck?
Oh, come on. You can't do that. You can't be he's his own artist and he's really, really excellent. B, Mike Zeck is one of the greatest artists to ever work in mainstream comics, as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? But yes, I don't like comparing anybody. It's like, well, somebody said, well, how does Paul McCartney compare to Bob Dylan, compared to Ray Davies, compared to Michael Jackson, compared to, I don't know, Kurt Cobain? You know what I mean? Everybody's their own thing,
Well, I'm not sure I actually mean a comparison so much as in terms of going with a through line between the two stories.
Oh, okay. On that level, he's doing a really excellent job of that. Yeah, he's matching the mood and the energy, and he's doing a great job. Yeah, like I said, I don't like to compare people. Oh, well, do you like him better than you like him? I also don't like it when people do that with my own work. Sometimes, on social media, people will go, "Oh, I love what you did with so and so. It's so much better than Joe Schmo did." And you don't need to put Joe Schmo down to say something nice about me, or you don't need to put me down to say something nice about Joe Schmo. I don't mean you. I just mean in general. I don't like that. You don't need to do that.
Great.
And people
I
do it
understand that.
innocently. They're not being malicious. They're just expressing their opinion. But especially in a public forum like that, you don't need to be negative about other people. Praise the things that you love without having to spit on the things that you don't.
Yeah. So in that case, you would say he's a worthy successor to Mike Zeck?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, there's a real horror quality, and there's some pages in the first issue where it's absolutely pure horror comics, and he delivered 110%. Really did great work.
Amazing. So congratulations on both the DeMultiverse and Lost Hunt and the recently completed Ben Reilly Spider-Man.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you would like to plug or mention?
I think I plugged my novella, The Excavator. So please, if you like my work, check that out, because that story means a lot to me. I'm working on a new novella right now. I've got some other things cooking that I can't talk about yet. I think that's enough hype for one day. We don't want people to fall down on the floor from the weight of the hype, But right now, what I really ask is just, these Kickstarters, they're a roll of the dice. You don't know. You're taking a risk, and it's a fun risk. So if you have enjoyed my work, if you've enjoyed the work of my collaborators, please come along and support us. Come along for this journey, because we literally, it's like, it's the cliche, can't do it without you. We literally can't do it without you. So I hope that on October 11th at noon, everyone will run to their computers and support the DeMultiverse. And how's that for a commercial?
And if you don't like Kickstarter, go to spellboundcomics.com.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope to talk to you again next time.
Yeah, it's always great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Take good care.
And